What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Truckee Pacific Reviews. I am your host, Dave, and with me, as always, is Dante. How the hell are
Hello,
you?
sir.
Hey,
Hello there.
hi. What you doing?
I don't know.
No? Guess what we did over the weekend? We love Christmas in our house. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about some Halloween movies, but we've already moved on. Yes? We have already turned on our Christmas tree. So, but this is actually like 3 weeks later than we did last year. So this is kind of late for us. But yeah, we've snowed over the weekend. So we're like, hey, let's put up the Christmas tree and let's listen to some Christmas music. So I'm kind of in the Christmas spirit. I've already moved past Halloween. I've already moved past Thanksgiving. It's going to be kind of weird for those holidays anyway. I just moved straight on to Christmas. And so that's where my mind is. What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the Christmas spirit, kind of in the Halloween, but since we put up the Christmas tree, I'm not really in the Halloween spirit anymore.
Yeah, Halloween's just different this year, man. Like, there's no need to buy a costume because there's no parties to go to. There's no trick-or-treating to do. Dante's kind of nearing the end of his trick-or-treating career, as it is anyway.
Who's to say?
I don't know. My dad, he forced me to stop trick-or-treating at age 13. So, like, I think I was 13 years old was the last time I went trick-or-treating, and my dad's like, you're not going again.
Well, that was the 80s, and they cut all taxes for rich people. So.
Yeah. Like, well, it wasn't the 80s. It was
like 90. It was like 90, right? Yeah, it was like 92.
It was 92, yeah.
It was still the 90s.
Yes. I don't know how that changes. I guess in the 2000s, people can, 40, 50-year-olds can go trick-or-treating, I guess. I don't know. As a matter of fact, so Dante, you haven't ever listened to the Santori What Now, but Santori What Now is another show here on Truckee Pacific starring our good friend Mike Santori. And it's kind of like a recap show where he talks about the week of him doing the Santori project, which is great. And then he also he dares some of his friends to come on and do a little name that tune. And if he loses, then he has to do a challenge. And last night he lost his challenge, and I told him that he has to go trick-or-treating this Saturday. So he's like he's older than I am. He's definitely older than James is, but he's going to be out trick-or-treating. He may or may not be cross-dressing. We haven't determined that yet, but he'll be trick-or-treating anyway. So that was his dare. So, who knows? It's a fun show. So definitely check it out here on the Truckee Pacific Network. So we're like way off track. Dante and I, we took a week off because we've been watching some movies. We watched a couple movies. We watched The New Witches, and we watched a movie called The Vampires versus the Bronx. But we decided Army of Darkness, yeah, totally. Army of Darkness. We watched the original Dracula, the original Invisible Man, because what we want to do is we want to start watching some of the old original Universal monsters. And so we're going to talk about The Witches, which I really liked, and Vampires versus the Bronx, which I really, really liked. We'll talk about that next week. Yeah. This week, I think it would be fun if we kind of review the original Dracula and the original Invisible Man.
It's a 2-in-1.
Say again?
It's a 2-in-1.
It is a 2-in-1. And all for free. So whoever's watching this, all 10 of you guys who end up watching this, you get this for free. So you are very welcome. But it'd be fun to just to kind of compare these old school movies because movies these days are just so over the top and effects laden. And I mean, like, we're going back to when movies were really still a primitive art form. Like music and sound in movies was very, very new at this time still. So very different. They're very quiet movies because there's no music in them. Very little music, and the actors are like shouting their lines because the sound recording equipment was so primitive that they had to like shout their lines in order to get them across. And so
Invisible Man, there's a lot of shouting.
There's a lot of shouting. We're going to actually talk about that here. But first, I love vampires, man. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love one of my favorite movies of all time is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I want to start off by reviewing the 1931 Bela Lugosi classic Dracula. And Dante, I want to get your first impressions. What do you think?
Man, was that a trip. It was weird. I couldn't really catch on to anything because it was just so I don't know why. I just didn't feel like it invested in it that much. I liked it. There was like a plastic bat a few times.
I'm sorry, can you recreate what the plastic bat looked like?
It's exactly what it looked like.
It totally looked like they got a bat on the end of like a rope or something, then just like bounced it up and down. So it was like, and it was a huge ass bat too. It was like crazy sized bat.
Invisible Man is way better, I gotta say. But Dracula.
Let's review Dracula, and then we'll review Invisible Man, and then we're going to compare the two, because they came out 2 years apart, and the quality of the movie is just so drastic between the two. But like I said, I love vampires. Ever since I saw The Lost Boys when I was 9. I've always been fascinated by vampires, and I am currently writing a vampire novel right now, which is I just taking my whole love of vampire lore and history and putting it all into one book. So I love vampires. What?
And I taught you something about vampires.
You did? What'd you teach me?
Go into your review. I'll tell that later.
All right. Ooh, we're setting up for later. I like this. So my impression of Dracula was loosely based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Loosely based. The effects were goofy, but if you put on your like 1930s cap, then you're like, yeah, I can totally get into this. I can see why it would be scary. Bela Lugosi was probably the best part of that movie, but he hardly said any words. He was probably saying like, maybe 20 words or something like that the whole time. And like, Mr. Renfield, I'm going to, hypnotize you. And then it was like, everybody else was like shouting at each other and like, just like weird interactions. And because of how primitive the movie making was, it was like they had these like long scenes and static and like one particular set. Like you see movies these days, it's like, set, boom, like different movies or different scenes and shit all just like melded together. But in this movie, it was like they were in the set and they extended it as long as possible. And like I said, they were shouting it out at you. And then like, oh, is that a vampire over there? And then you see the bat. It was pretty hokey. I'd say very hokey. I enjoyed watching it just because the movie was hokey. The movie wasn't particularly that great. But what I really enjoyed about this movie was the fact that Dante and I kind of did our own version of Mystery Science Theater over the course of this movie. Because, yeah, some of it was hard to understand because it was like, Bela Lugosi has a very thick Eastern European accent. And then everybody's yelling at each other. And, like, there's really, like, I'm trying to follow it with the understanding of this is based off of Bram Stoker, but they're not actually doing Bram Stoker. So I'm trying to like figure out what the hell's going on. So of the two movies, I definitely think Dracula was far inferior. I'm sure it was great at the time. Tell me, what did you think about Dracula?
I have to correct you on something.
No, I'm infallible. I don't make mistakes.
You did make a mistake, a big one.
Okay, what is it?
You said Bela Lugosi was the best part, but I gotta say, Renfield was probably the best part.
Well, that's my opinion. That wasn't. You can't correct me on my opinion.
Well, we're in 2020, so I guess now I think that is true.
Yeah, I guess this time of year or this time of our society, opinions don't really matter anymore. So yeah, people shit all over your opinions. But
okay, I wasn't.
Why
trying
did you
to
like Renfield so much? Tell me.
I don't know. I just feel like he had more lines, and you could see that he was going crazy, and it was like, yeah, he turned crazy for no reason because Dracula's a douche.
Hashtag Dracula's a douche. No,
Cancel Dracula 2020.
Hashtag Dracula's a douche. No, I thought Renfield's character was very good. I thought the Jonathan Harker, who is the main character in the Bram Stoker, like the actual Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, who was played by Keanu Reeves, like he's supposed to be the main guy of the movie, like the main protagonist. But in this version, it was not Jonathan Harker. It was really more Renfield, because Renfield went crazy, and then he kind of like saw the error of his ways. Is that what you're saying?
I would.
Okay, expound.
So,
Keep going.
Okay, I would say yes. He does know the error of his ways, but also he's going crazy because he's eating flies, and everyone calls him Fly Eater. Like Dracula, it wasn't my favorite because it was just very confusing. But Invisible-Man, it made a lot of sense. So but I have a lot of trivia. So if you want to segue into trivia, I have some trivia.
I will. Just 1 second. I do want to say that the guy who played Van Helsing in this version of Dracula was also very good. And I keep referring to the Bram Stoker's Dracula because it's loosely based off of the book. They called Renfield Fly Eater because he ate flies and spiders.
Really?
Yeah, that's what he did when he was in the insane asylum. He ate flies and spiders. He wanted to. That was like his way of being a vampire, because he couldn't like drink anybody's blood, and he had been converted to a vampire. So the only way that he could, like in his own mind, be similar to Dracula was to take the life of flies and spiders.
No, when I said really, that was a joke because like his name is Fly Eater, so he eats flies.
I thought it was just a cool nickname. That's
It
my
is
nickname.
A cool nickname.
My nickname was Spider Eater.
Trivia.
Give me some Dracula trivia.
Dracula's castle. Actually, no. I don't give credit usually, but I give all the credit for finding all of these facts to IMDb.com.
IMDb is so great. Dante,
yeah, it has everything.
You're so young, man. You don't have any idea what it used to be like when you're like trying to think of who was in that one movie. Like, what was that movie about? And like, never any trivia. I love going on to IMDb and like reading trivia like this. Like, who the hell knew about any of this stuff for Dracula? So, go on, sir.
Dracula's castle was actually a painting on glass in front of the camera.
Yeah, very primitive effects. They painted the castle onto the camera, and then they like filmed the carriage coming up to the castle. And now they just CGI that shit.
Well, not really. It was like they got a painting on glass and they put it in front of camera. Well, it's confusing. So when Bela Lugosi died, he was buried wearing a black silk cape. But that was not the one that he wore in Dracula. That one was sold by his son, Bela Lugosi Jr. But it failed to sell for $1.2 million. No one bought it, so he just gave it to a museum.
That's fair.
And this is the most interesting fact, I would say. There's a Spanish version of Dracula called Dracula.
Dracula.
It was filmed at night on the same exact set, and so whenever the actors who did the English Dracula went home, the Spanish actors did their set and made their movie.
That is very interesting. I would say that's also pretty common for the time, figuring that Universal had to build these big elaborate sets, and so they had to recoup some of this money, so they would like rent it out and reuse those sets, so they didn't just like have to just like eat the funding for this.
So the very first person talking in Dracula was Carla. I'm just gonna call her Lammel. Carla Lammel.
Lamel.
And she
Lamel.
she takes a lot of pride from being the first woman to talk in any horror movie ever. She's very proud about that fact. Well, she was. She's dead now, but
she was the last surviving cast member,
yeah,
right?
she was. You want to know a fun fact?
No.
She was the niece. So Carla Lamel was a niece of Carl Lamel.
What? What?
His name is Carl, and then her name is Carla. And Carl Lamel was actually the founder of Universal.
Oh, so a little nepotism going on there is what you're saying.
Exactly, nepotism. The studio did not want, so you know this, but the studio didn't want to come off as gay, so Dracula only attacked women so that it didn't look like he was being gay.
Which is kind of weird because like they'd rather you assault a woman than pretend to be gay or look gay or be perceived as gay.
Different. Bro, it was the 1930s.
It was 1931 to be exact.
Are you telling me that 1930s men would rather be gay than assault women?
I don't know. I wasn't alive then, so I couldn't tell what was in people's minds back then. But looking back now, like that's kind of a weird statement. Looking at it through the lens of 2020, of like, is it really better to assault women instead of just be perceived as gay? I thought that's kind of a weird statement.
I feel like whatever we say, we're going to be taken negatively. So that's the end of that. So we're basically done with Dracula, right? We're done talking about Dracula?
Except for one thing.
Go on, and then I will make a bridge.
This was actually not the first incarnation of Dracula or movie Vampire. Based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. The 1922 Nosferatu, which is a silent movie starring Max Schreck.
Ogre.
Not the ogre. This guy was very creepy. This was a very creepy looking vampire. And if you have seen, I think it's called Kiss of the Vampire. I could be wrong with that. Yes. There's actually a movie about the making of Nosferatu with William Dafoe as Max Schreck. The names are different than they are in the Bram Stoker's book, but it's the Bram Stoker book, but with just different names. And the vampire is Count Orlok. Orlok. Vampire Count Orlok. He's Dracula, but they follow the Bram Stoker's story. Anyway, silent film, actually filmed in Transylvania, and on the set of the movie, they actually had some like really interesting like hauntings going on at the time. So a lot of people talk about the Exorcist and how like their set was haunted, but if you look at some of the history behind Nosferatu, you'll see that there was also like a lot of like really creepy things happening at the time. And so iconic was Nosferatu in that movie that Stephen King based his movie and his books, Salem's Lot, off of Nosferatu, and not any of like the incarnations of Dracula, but actually off of Nosferatu. So there's a little bit of trivia, and I have not seen Nosferatu, but I have seen the William Dafoe version where he actually plays the making of. So there you go. So now I think we have wrapped up the Dracula part of Invisible Man. So I want you to go ahead, or we wrapped up the review of Dracula. So go into Invisible Man.
Bridge. I'm going to make a bridge. I'm going to bridge into Invisible Man with the Kathy Najimy tweet.
Hell yeah. Let's do some Kathy Najimy tweets, shall we?
I just have a single one that I found funny. So I think if you've been a long watcher, if you see the Hocus Pocus one, you know that she doesn't really put like actual grammatical spelling. So if there's like you're, it's just you are. And if there's just you, if she says, are you watching? It's just you. So just keep that in mind. Are you watching hashtag not done on at PBS?
No.
I'm not. I'm 14 minutes in and sobbing. Please watch with your friend's daughter. Okay, so this is so weird because she says, please watch with your friend's daughters. Like, why would you want to do that? Like
that's
I'm gonna
pretty
watch
creepy.
this
Like, hey, can your daughter come over and watch the show with me? Like, is that
on
cool?
PBS.
That's a weird statement, but
So,
it's Kathy
like,
Najimy, so there's no ill intent involved, I'm sure.
it's just very specific. Like, please watch with your friends' daughters. So, okay, she says, please watch with your friends' daughters and sons, because she capitalized the sons. And then she says, we'll inform and ignite you at Maker's Woman.
So are we inviting our neighbors' sons over as well as daughters? So it's like, hey, just let your kids come over. Let's watch this PBS show. I'm sure they're going to be thrilled to watch it with us.
No, she added a place called Maker's Woman.
Okay.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know.
So, first off, very specific that you're like, please watch with your friends' daughters and sons. So it's like, hey, can your friends' daughters and sons? I'm gonna watch #NotDone at PBS. How's that sound? Oh, so cool. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, one thing I know about kids, they just love coming over and watching PBS shows.
Especially Arthur.
Caillou. Dante, you were the biggest fan of Caillou back in the day, just so you know.
I'm not anymore.
Not anymore. Well, you're almost 13 years old, man, so I hope you're not. I want to make a correction. It is called Shadow of the Vampire, about the making of, I know, Kiss of the Vampire is a much different movie.
Is it a biopic?
Say again?
Is it a biopic?
Shadow of the Vampire, yes. It's about the making of Nosferatu.
Oh, cool. I'm going to watch that by myself.
Yeah, it's a cool
movie. Or we can watch it together.
All right.
No,
so
I'm going to watch Nosferatu.
You've bridged. You've gone over the bridge from Dracula to Invisible Man. So I want to hear your opinion on Invisible Man.
It's probably one of the best Universal films I've ever seen.
That's a bold statement, sir.
If I could rank my top 3 Universal films, I think I have a tie for number 1.
Okay.
Tie for number 1. Invisible Man and Harry Potter 7 and Harry Potter 6. So it's Invisible Man, Harry Potter 7 and 6. 6 and 7.
That's good. That's a pretty bold move, because those Harry Potter movies are pretty incredible, and compared to this 1933 movie, that's saying quite a bit. So what'd you like most about it?
I don't know. I just really liked it. I thought it was cool. The villain was cool. It was good for its time. It had good effects. I'll talk about that later. And it was just a good film. It was just a really good film.
Yeah, you and I are both on the same page with this one. I think we're both on the same page for both of them. I definitely, out of the two, The Invisible Man was far superior. And just Invisible Man was made 2 years after Dracula, and the effects are just so much better. I mean, pretty incredible what they were able to do. So why don't you tell us how they did those effects? Because it's like, this is 1933. They don't have green screens. They don't have CGI. Obviously, the computers haven't even been invented yet. So all of these effects of making this guy invisible and stuff moving, it's all done through practical effects. So how do they do that?
Honestly, I don't know how they did it, but when I look it up, it just says they made the guy black velvet, all his visible parts black velvet, and he was filmed in a black velvet background. And I really have no idea, but I think they did some sort of magic and just movie magic and just made him invisible. Like, I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I think you and I watched kind of like a making of, and
not really.
They made Claude Rains wear, like you said, like a black velvet outfit, or you know how they have mocap suits now? They have like all little balls and shit on them. But back then they had like these suits made of velvet, and then they filmed him in like his pajamas against a black background. So you couldn't see his hands, you couldn't see his face, but you can see the moving clothes. And then they would superimpose that over the other part of the film. So you see him skipping down the road, just a pair of pants skipping down the road. And then when like he's moving stuff, you know, that's all done through like strings are attached to some things, and then like other things are dropped and then put in reverse. So it looks like it's being picked up. I mean, just so incredible where these effects that both at the beginning of the movie and the end, it gave love to all the special effects creators because they really went all out. And I think that's why I really enjoyed this movie as much as I did, just because the effects were so crazy good for 1933. I can just see myself in a movie theater seeing these crazy effects happen and just being completely blown away. And then on top of the plot was good, the acting was much better. It flowed better.
I agree. It made more sense.
Made more sense, absolutely. And that kind of leads into one of my favorite movies so far of this year is The Invisible Man 2020, which is produced by Blumhouse, who's like the big name in horror these days. They took basically the same kind of concept, but put it into the lens of 2020. So instead of having like a chemical reaction cause the man to be invisible, this guy had a suit. Like he created a suit that made him invisible. So, and that was just as crazy. Like a lot of people aren't scared by the Invisible Man, but then when you're watching this movie, like, yeah, there's a lot of power that comes with being invisible. Like you can do and get away with a lot of stuff by being invisible.
I totally agree.
Did you think this one was scary? Did you think either of these movies were particularly scary?
No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
I'm proud of you though, because before Halloween, you were adverse to watching any kind of scary movies, but you've really been eager to start watching these. So I'm proud of you for that.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah. So why don't you give us some Invisible Man trivia, if you have any more besides what I already gave?
Can you give me just a few seconds?
No, you have to go right now.
Darn it.
Just waiting on you. Just waiting on the trivia.
Well, I have a lot of trivia, but I just need to see something.
All right, he just needs to see something. There was a Kevin Bacon Invisible Man, which was okay. This is a story that they have continued throughout the years. There's like Sons of the Invisible Man, and then there's like Laurel and Hardy and the Invisible Man. Dracula, there's like 35 sequels to this Dracula, like Brides of Dracula, Wives of Dracula, Sons of Dracula, Abbott and Costello Dracula. But the best, I will say, Dante, I hope you watch this too, even though there's some nudity in this, which my parents took me to the movie theater for my birthday when I was your age, and like, let's watch this movie. And there's like boobies and stuff. Like, what? This is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. But Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, is the single best vampire movie I have ever seen. I love Lost Boys a little bit more, but it's Bram Stoker's Dracula is the best of the vampire movies ever made.
So, do you know where The Invisible Man is set?
In England, right? Or Ireland or something like that?
Because I tried to look it up and it just says Universal Studios.
I think, yeah. And when you go to Los Angeles and go to Universal Studios Los Angeles, you can actually see some of the sets and stuff. Like they still have the sets on their lot, but and as well as like Psycho. But I think the actual movie was set in somewhere like, I think it was like Ireland or something like that, because all the people in the pub and the boarding house where Claude Rains goes at the beginning, they're all Irish and thick, broke, accented Irish folks and Northern Englanders. And like the funniest character was the shop owner's wife. She was like this old lady that she just kept screaming the whole time. I mean, she's like ear-piercing screams the whole time. And I know that leads into one of your trivia facts there.
So it was set in, I think, UK, because I looked it up, and this film was released like a month before Prohibition was lifted.
Yeah.
So it's not in UK, but...
No, it is UK. Okay, Prohibition was here in the United States. It had nothing to do with Europe.
That's what I just said.
No, you didn't. You said it was filmed in the UK, but anyway, it's set in like northern England or Ireland, which is the UK. little geography lesson for you, sir.
She is okay. The lady who played the pub lady.
She was great. I love her. Other than Claude Rains, she was my favorite part of the movie.
So James Whale, the director, could not stop laughing because she was so funny. Because like her humor, just in general, he loved her humor so much that he just couldn't stop laughing. So, next fact: James Whale, the director, again. His original choice was Boris Karloff, but they got into a fight because James Whale said Karloff sounded dumb and wanted someone intellectual because Karloff's marked lisp became an issue for him. And so they wanted a more intellectual voice. And so he heard Claude Rains' screen test in another room, and so he hired him.
So I'm going to interrupt here. Boris Karloff plays Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein, which we'll be watching sometime this week, as well as he is the narrator for How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the 1960s cartoon. So if you hear, it's a mean one, Mr. Grinch, that's Boris Karloff. So imagine him as the Invisible Man.
So Una O'Connor, the pub lady, she was in Bride of Frankenstein.
Cool.
She was Minnie.
We'll be looking for Minnie when we watch Bride of Frankenstein, if we ever get to it.
Maybe.
What else?
Ooh, what else? Well, that's all I have, but I have a lot of facts about the new Invisible Man.
Let's do it. I love that new one. And it might be a little too scary for you, but I think it's worth a watch, for sure. Oh, all right. Let's do it. He's sounding very confident. Now he's got a couple scary movies under his belt. I say, let's do it.
So Invisible Man 2020, the bad guy's last name is Griffin, which is obviously made after Jack Griffin, who is the Invisible Man in Invisible Man. And a lot of people actually refused to watch the film because some actual abuse victims said their PTSD was triggered by the trailer alone. And in removing the horror element, the film strictly comes off as an abuse victim being tormented by their old abusive ex-partner.
I get that. No, totally. Yeah, the guy was in the Invisible Man was pretty terrible to his.
But in Invisible Man 1933, not only did he kill like 133 people, but he did push a baby over.
He did. He was kind of a jerk. Like every time he'd kill somebody, he'd like skip away laughing and joking. But it was so funny. Like when he first made his escape, he
just pushed the baby over.
He did like pushed a baby over. Like so this guy is gonna be evil if he's pushing babies over.
And he like derailed a train that had 100 people in it. So
yeah, so he pushed a baby over and derailed a train and killed 100 people. And
which one is worse? No one will know.
No, I just think of it. Put it through the lens of 1930s. I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'd be scared out of your wits, especially since science was still kind of like, there's still mad scientists, and this is a time where like nobody really knew what scientists were doing in their labs, and so they could create something like this, and it's very plausible that they could have created this, and kind of scary. So putting it through that lens, this movie was probably pretty terrifying.
So the drug that turns Invisible Man invisible is called monocaine, which is also a line in one of Blue Oyster Cult songs. That's what I looked up monocaine. It was like uses of monocaine, and like one of them was like Blue Oyster Cult, and like it was in like the third line of one of their songs. This is monocaine.
So Blue Oyster Cult, most popularly known for their song "Fear the Reaper," which was part of the SNL skit with Will Ferrell when he had more cowbell. I have a fever, and the only cure is more cowbell. That's Blue Oyster Cult's "Fear the Reaper." See, you're not the only one with trivia facts, man. Come on.
I finished all of my.
All right.
Trivia.
So let's give some final impressions of these movies. Let's rate them, and then let's get some. Do you have any more Kathy Najimy tweets? No more.
Okay, so I give Dracula a 2 out of 4.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Dracula 1 pumpkin on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Invisible Man 4 pumpkins.
Yeah, I'll give Invisible Man 4 pumpkins as well. I think the effects and the acting and the story just made it a much better movie. And I would have given Dracula 0 pumpkins, but it had the bat. I love the bat. The bat gets the 1 pumpkin for me.
If you want to watch if you want to know more about this movie, either get Peacock for free and just watch the film, or watch Dead Meat's Invisible Man kill count. It's really good.
Yeah. I'm not much into like YouTube videos and stuff, but Dante turned me on to this show on YouTube called Dead Meat, where they kind of like review popular horror movies and do kill counts, and that's kind of where we found Invisible Man and got some of our trivia from. But I definitely recommend Dead Meat as well, and they also have a podcast.
Yeah, he had Rhett on it from Rhett and Link, and his favorite horror film of all time is, guess what it is?
Exorcist.
No.
What?
Cabin in the Woods.
That's weird. That's Cabin in the Woods is a good movie. So, and we'll talk. I'll talk more about my favorite horror movies. This week's episode of the Mile High Podcast.
Do a top 10.
I'm not gonna do top 10 because we're gonna do in top 5. But Cabin in the Woods is a very good horror movie. I like how it takes the horror movie trope and like kind of spins it around a little bit, because it's kind of like, all these horror movies are like manufactured by scientists in the lab, and I like that aspect. It's funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But as for like a scary movie, it's not really all that scary. I think probably the best horror movie of the last decade is Hereditary. It takes a lot to make me like feel anxious or nervous while I'm watching a scary movie, and Hereditary is definitely a much better scary movie than that is. But it's a very enjoyable movie for sure.
And Dead Meat has a kill count on that one, and that made me nervous even, and I couldn't even sleep because of that one scene where the girl, I'm not going to even say.
Yeah, that's definitely an intense movie for sure. There's no joy to be had by watching that movie. It's made to make you feel uncomfortable and scared.
Unless you're a masochist.
That's a fair point. Really fair point. I'd have, not to. There's not going to be a lot of people that watch this video and then go and watch the Mile High Podcast this week. I will still say the best scary and my favorite horror movie of all time is going to be Exorcist. It's the scariest movie I've ever seen, and it still holds up. I've watched it many, many times, and even to this day, it's still the scariest movie I've ever seen, and still the best horror movie. So we'll be talking about all that on this week's episode of the Mile High Podcast. We're actually having a really special guest on this week, my longtime friend, Chef David Bondarchuk. He's going to join us for our Halloween episode along with Melody, and hosted by me and James. We're going to be simulcast on the I'm from Denver Facebook page. David has a lot of his friends, so we want to welcome any new followers, any new viewers onto our show. Welcome to the neighborhood. Welcome to Truckee Pacific. We do this for fun. We don't make a ton of money off of it. We have a good time. We have a lot of good friends who come on and we talk to them. We have the Santori project going right now, which is taking Mike Santori, and he's going all over the country and just kind of blogging and doing video blogs and stuff of this wonderful country of ours. Welcome in. If it's the first time you've seen any shows on Truckee Pacific, we want to welcome you in. We have a bunch of content on our pages, so feel free to go back and watch some of the shows that may not have been as good as these ones, but they're all very funny and all pretty good. So that's all I have to say. Dante, closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Watch Dead Meat and also watch My High Podcast.
All right. Hello. Thanks. Thanks, dude. That's great.
Also do Patreon, our Patreon.
We don't really have a Patreon, but we are on Apple Podcast, Stitcher Podcast, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can find all that stuff on www.truckeepacific.com. Hope to see you guys soon. I'm Dave. This is Dante. Definitely go watch Invisible Man on Peacock. It's free. So thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
This has been a Truckee Pacific production. For sponsorship inquiries and comments, go to themilehighpodcast@gmail.com.